Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Dr. Roz Show. Thank you guys for your patience. We had a little technical difficulties there, but we are good now. I am so excited. Today's guest is Carolynn Johnson, CEO of Diversity Inc. I am so happy to have you with us here today, Carolynn. Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for saying yes to the podcast. We are really excited and we just cannot wait to hear the great nuggets that you are going to share with us today. So, could you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself? I know they read your bio, but it's always better hearing from you.
Oh, no, absolutely. So I am Carolyn Johnson, CEO of Diversity Inc. I've been with the company for 17 years. I am a wife to a firefighter. And I'm sure for those of us who were not giving our first responders the love, right? I'm sure through COVID, we feel very differently and appreciate them a lot more than we showed before. And I am a mother to two very interesting, amazing little people. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son.
Oh,
Um, and my parents are still alive, and so caring for your parents is also something that I am engaging in right now at this 40th year of my life. And I am a servant leader. That's how I view myself. And so don't let the title fool you. I get people telling me what to do all day, every day. So
well, that's great to hear. That's great to hear because it humanizes you a bit, for our audience. And I'm just really, really, truly excited to have you here. So let's really get into these questions.
absolutely.
So let's start with the question of mentoring.
Mhm.
So statistically, it shows that women of color really struggle with finding mentors sometimes. Was that an issue for you?
Early on, yes. Before I started at Diversity Inc., I worked at a large publishing company,
Mhm.
and this whole concept of being the other, it's not just something that is on your shoulders in the room. Being the other is something that follows you around. It's like a weight on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And in being the other, for me, it started very early. When I was in elementary school, my mother and father thought it best to move to the suburbs where we were the only family. And so early on, I was immersed in cultures where I was different, um, quietly viewed as not good enough. And that's something that, because we didn't understand what was happening, we couldn't solve for it. And so then going into work environments, um, being the only Black woman in a predominantly white male space, um, I had a lot of issues around asking for help, connecting,
Yeah.
believing there was something in common. And so mentoring wasn't even something I thought possible for me,
Mm.
uh, because the main ingredient missing wasn't me creating an environment to be mentored. It was those in power, those who were responsible for unleashing my talent or helping me to do that, not seeing it was important. And so then I went to work at Diversity Inc., and that changed. And I called on the relationships that I had early on with my aunt. And you just think your family is responsible for showing up for you. You don't view it as mentoring. You don't view it as sponsorship. You don't view it as
Yeah.
coaching. But
Yeah.
it wasn't until I started to get it that I knew all along that I had already had it. And so you don't know what you don't know until you get in a room where you feel it, where you
Mm-hmm.
see
Mm-hmm.
it, where
Absolutely. Guys, it sounds like we may be having a little there we go.
and you invest in it, and you know that others need it as well.
Thank you. We lost a little bit of you there. If you guys can tell that Carolyn is leaving
Yep. And so other things considered.
a very important meeting, so she's in her car. So we apologize for that. But I,
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you a little bit better now.
Okay.
You were going in and out. But thank you for sharing that story about mentorship. What advice would you have for someone that's just starting out, entry level, our new college graduates? They're going into with this pandemic. They're
Mhm.
really going into a very different kind of workspace, and it may be very hard to connect with mentors. What words of advice would you share with them?
So, the first thing that I would do is tell them to not feel powerless, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's something that, and it's not just folks that are entry level. I think all of us, no matter where we sit in an org chart, we are adjusting every single day to having to do the things that we used to do differently, right? And so, first things I would say is don't feel powerless, because when you research, when you ask questions. Um, you own the ability to make this work for you. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, um, don't believe that you have to do it exactly as others have. Some people, so for example, some people feel like they can do, depending on proximity. Some people feel like they can just do Zoom meetings, but you can ask your mentor to take a walk with you, take a walk in the park, have a cup of coffee. You have not completely lost the importance of opportunity to have those across the table conversations, because some of us need that interaction to thrive and to get what we need. So be creative, and you don't have to do it the way you've seen it be done.
Mhm.
Be creative to make sure that you get what you need. But more now, it's important to ask and don't wait for people to approach you. Make sure that you understand what that person is going to be able to contribute. Have a very specific list of what you expect to get out of it, and then have a conversation as to whether or not they can deliver. And be prepared to talk about what you're going to contribute as well. That's some advice that I would give to folks who are trying to enter into productive mentoring relationships in this COVID work era that we find ourselves.
No, I love that. Being proactive because it is your career. You really need to steer your own career. And so
Yes.
I love that. But I think people get confused with the idea of a sponsor, an advisor, and a mentor. Can you
Mhm.
speak to the differences of those three?
Sure. So, when I think of an advisor or a coach, um, and when I think about like the hierarchy of relationships, that person can be anyone, whether it's a somebody that you work with as a peer, if it's somebody that's on a member of a nonprofit organization that you volunteer with. That person can be a family member.
Mhm.
They are observing you, and information that they believe will be helpful or useful to you, they share that with you openly. They'll talk with you about questions that you have once it's shared. A mentor um, typically will be somebody that's like, one level ahead of you in your organization, or an organization that you worked at previously, because it doesn't always have to be in the company in which you work. And
Mhm.
that person is really focusing on giving you feedback that can help you with your career, right? And then when you think about sponsorship, that person is typically at least two or three levels ahead of you in an organization, and they are putting their relationship capital on the line for you in rooms where you are not, but should be. Let's just make sure we're clear with that.
Mhm.
And they are making sure that they understand your growth, your credentials, and your opportunity, right? And
Mhm.
they are talking on a regular basis about what you can contribute, your growth, and why you should have a seat at the table. So those are, for me, the differences between advisors, mentors, and sponsors. And there's one other group that I believe is extremely important, and that is allies, right?
Mhm.
And allies are extremely important because you don't have to be at any level of the organization to be an ally. You just have to be a person that is willing to use your influence to help someone else. So whether you are a person in the mailroom or a coordinator, and you are validating that someone else is a sponsor, that they are contributing to communities that they have nothing to gain from or are not a member, anybody can be an ally, because everybody has power, because everybody has the ability to influence.
No, I love that. I love that. And I think sometimes, and I love that idea of being an ally because I think sometimes we have this imposter syndrome,
Yes.
right? That takes place. And so we feel maybe shy or feel incompetent or we feel like we don't have enough years and we may not have enough experience. And
Yeah.
that hinders us in so many ways. And for someone who doesn't truly know us, it may look like we're not serious about our careers, which may be further from the truth. Maybe we just don't know the route to get there. So I'm so happy to have you here today because I really wanted, young ladies and just anyone, honestly, to try to understand what it takes to actually have a seat at the table. Like, what is the route that one needs to take to ensure that they get there?
Right. So, and I'm big on making sure that we stand in and exercise our power. So I'm sure that word is going to get overused in this conversation, and believe me, that is on purpose, because I think that's what we give up. First,
Mm,
we always give that up, and we give it up the second that we don't believe in ourselves, that we don't believe that we're good enough, and that we don't believe we belong. And so, as it relates to this table discussion, you have the power to decide if that's the table that you want to be at based on
mhm,
who's around it, um, the model behavior that they're putting forward, and to be discerning enough to know if that's going to serve you, your purpose, and your passion, which you need to discuss with yourself. And I know I'm saying it sounds crazy talking to yourself, but on a regular basis because it changes. It is not static. From one day to the next, it changes, or at least it should. If it's not, then you need to put yourself in different situations to get different experiences. But
mhm.
every table, because somebody else made it sound sexy or good, is not for you. So make sure that you will not be swallowed up. And for the purpose of this, the table could be, if you're a recent college grad, is this company going to accept me and allow me to develop into my best authentic self to be a important contributor? And
Yes.
so how do you determine that? Well, you may not be able to, have this conversation with the director of career services, but you can go to the company's website. You can look and see what the leadership team looks like, if it's a publicly traded organization, or if it's not publicly traded but they still have a board. Who's on that board? What are they saying? With the place that we find ourselves in, where people are starting to really realize the Black experience, especially in urban areas in this country, where we are gunned
Mm,
down in ways that animals are not even treated.
right.
What is being said about Black lives? If you find yourself in a situation where you are being heavily recruited, but a leader who is influential has not actually said the phrase Black Lives Matter, then it doesn't matter, and you need to find somewhere else to go and interview. Second, I would say that do not be turned away just because you don't see somebody that looks like you, if they are not talking about a plan and accepting that reality, right? There's, when you think about the talent pipeline and when you think about fairness, if there's not enough people who look like you, and mind you, diversity is not just going into an organization and being Black and wanting to see more Black people, right?
Mhm,
Diversity is, it's gender, it's ethnicity, it is orientation, it is a person's ability, whether it is seen or unseen or disability. It's socioeconomic.
mhm,
Diversity comes in a lot of different forms, and in some cases, it's your cognitive differences, right? And so, make sure that you understand what the plan is. And the only way you can plan is if you have measured before. And so, what are the external validations that are out there? Are they sharing information with organizations like DiversityInc? Are they being benchmarked? Is there a level of transparency? And
mhm.
so these are the things that you can check in on so that you make sure you are pulling your seat up to the right table. Don't step into somebody else's seat. Pull up your own chair, and then you sit down, and then you become part of the conversation and be an equal contributor. That's what I would talk. That's what I would say when we're thinking about seats at tables and advice.
No, that is so profound because you're absolutely right. In terms of if you have not seen the heads of organizations have any kind of comment about Black Lives Matter, then, you do wonder or
Yeah.
question, where do they stand on the matter? Is this a place where I'll be accepted? Is this a place where I'll be valued? So I'm so glad that you brought that up because we have some people, well with this pandemic, people have lost their jobs, and so people are just eager to get a job. But I think what you said is so important in terms of making sure it's the right table, making sure it's a good fit, making sure it's a place that has your interest in mind because the worst thing that can happen to an individual is getting a job and being miserable, but feeling stuck because they need the income. So I do like that you are encouraging people to check out the websites, to look at
Yes.
the culture of the company, to determine whether it is, beneficial for you. That, the comments are saying yes, and that's such a great point. People are responding that really resonated with them. And I wanted to ask this question about what is the difference between diversity and being culturally competent? Because companies can say the right stuff, but what if they really aren't culturally competent once you get in the door and you see what's there for the company?
Right. I'm sure the chat is about to go off, but I'm going to say this anyway. Um, I would tell you it's kind of just like high level. We are tribal, right? And
Right.
sometimes when we don't believe what else we have in common, that tribalism is visual, right? So, we'll think that because we're all black, that's our tribe, or because we're women, girl power, right? But I would tell you that your tribe is really about how you treat people,
Mm,
and your philosophies and your understanding that everybody is created equal. And that is not always something that you see with people who look like you, amount of melanin in their skin, right? And so
right.
when we think about cultural competency, I'll take it to healthcare because I think right now with COVID, I think we're all living in this space. And so
Yes.
I would much rather have a doctor who doesn't look like me, but who is well read and researched in the issues with how people like me have with their medical history. I would much rather a white doctor or a Latino doctor or an Asian doctor who understands the best care and plans for me than somebody who looks like me but has had very different experiences and did not care enough to do the research. So
Mm,
let's not think that culturally competent means you look like me. It means that you took the time to make sure that you understood my challenges and what the best plan forward for me is. And so that's the difference between diversity. Diversity is what you see. Cultural competence is how you prepare to care for people and deliver the services that you said you would. To me, those are the differences.
No, I love that. I love that completely because you're right. Just because we're the same ethnicity, it doesn't mean that we have the same experiences, and not to be taken for granted because we are from the same culture. So thank you for explaining that because a lot of people think that diversity means that you're called culturally competent, and that is the farthest from the truth.
Absolutely.
The farthest from the truth. So
Mhm.
thank you for explaining that. Everyone is saying enlightening. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. So true. It's about mutual fit. There is a question that came in
Okay.
that says, disability inclusion is a competitive advantage. The authentic, voice of intersectionality is important now than ever. How can
Mhm.
grassroots change agents have their voice heard in Diversity Inc?
So, I will. I mean, so this conversation around intersectionality, first coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, um, um, and actually she started talking about it when she was representing a woman who was let go from a large auto manufacturer And initially, the judge ruled in the auto company's favor because she was a woman and she was
Mhm.
black, and so you couldn't say that she was discriminated against for either of those differences. But when you coupled them together, you understood that it was doubly clear that she was excluded from the process to be able to earn a living because of those intersections of discrimination. And so when we talk about intersectionality, that's really important. And so I think when we talk about like the grassroots initiatives at Diversity Inc., again, it is very simple, but it is foundational in understanding that all people are created equally and that everybody's contribution is not the same. And so I think about Toyota Motor Company and how they made sure that people with autism, using the way in which their minds work differently, had a
Mhm.
place in the factory counting, right? And it was interesting because not only did they give them that opportunity, but they made the environment one in which they would be comfortable and succeed. And then they tracked it and shared that information with others. And then they took on that model, and then they brought them into their companies. And we see it come up a lot in accounting right now. And so the way Diversity Inc. is supporting that is by telling those stories, gathering the data, making sure that we do the analysis to validate it, and then we share it with others. That is actually that's how we're supporting people with disabilities from a very simple yet effective level.
No, I love that. I love that. And I did not know that Toyota was doing that. So I'm happy to hear that. That's amazing because for and I've had the honor of working with autistic populations, and sometimes people feel as if their child's life may not have any meaning, or that it is they're very worried about what their future may look like. So I'm happy to hear that there are companies that are serving this population. That's awesome. Go ahead, Toyota. That's awesome. We had another question that came in. Can you talk a little more about how to go about getting a sponsor if you don't feel that you have one? That seems more strategic than a mentor.
So the first piece of advice I will share is you must be ready.
Mm,
And unfortunately, everybody is not ready for a sponsor. This career readiness conversation is extremely important. And how do you go about, what's the checklist look like for ready, right?
mhm,
Internally, are you making sure that you are taking advantage of every program, whether it's an employee resource group, and they're called different, they're named differently at different organizations. Some may call them affinity groups, employee resource groups, employee councils, right? Business resource groups. But are you making sure that you are interacting and being visible, right, to the
mhm,
people who would one day see you, want to know more about you, and learn that you are sponsor ready? You cannot select a sponsor. They must select you. But the only way they can select you if you stand up tall, shoulders back in front of them and make them understand why they should want to sponsor you. And
mhm,
so it's a very honest, sometimes painful conversation with yourself, because when you're honest, there are some areas where you think you're ready and you're not. And my grandmother used to always say, if you're not ready, get ready. But you can't
mhm.
really get ready until you understand what your gaps are and what your opportunities are, what your strengths are, and how that can support the overall business. You've got to be able to talk about yourself like a business for somebody to want to sponsor you. You are a brand, you are a product, and you need to be able, for someone who is going to sponsor you, come off that way. You have to show up that way.
No, I love that, Carolyn. That is awesome because, I always tell people that, with young girls that I mentor, like, you never know who's watching you. So you must always put
Hmm.
your best foot forward. You never know who's speaking on your
Absolutely.
behalf. You never know who is in the room advocating for you. But I like that idea, in terms of thinking of yourself as a brand. And, I learned that maybe a couple of years ago, but I don't think that people think about themselves in such a way that every time you open your mouth, you are marketing yourself. You're
Yes.
marketing your skills. Every time you show up in the world, you are marketing yourself. Every time you post to social media, You
Yes.
are marketing yourself. And I think that, people really just does not really do not understand that concept. And because they don't understand that concept, they miss out
Yeah.
on opportunities to have someone say, "Hey, I want to sponsor
Yeah.
this young person." And would this be an opportunity in terms of doing that? Because you said do a self-evaluation. Would
Mhm.
this be where you would bring in an advisor? You would have an advisor like tell you the truth about who you are, what those gaps are, what you need to
Yeah.
work on.
Yeah. So again, in thinking about, and again, this is all about where you work and the resources or employee programs that may be available to you. Some people work at organizations where they're not large enough, right,
Mhm.
to have those types of programs. But there are professional organizations that you could join that you can be aligned with a coach where they'll do an assessment, and everybody should have a coach. Everybody should have a coach, because this is the journey to constant understanding of how you're evolving, how you're growing. And it happens every day. It happens every week. It happens every month. And
Yeah.
so I would say early on, the second you sign your offer letter, you need a coach. Okay.
Okay.
You need to be on the hunt for having at least three mentors. And mind you, when you're identifying a mentor, make sure you bring your past forward, right? My aunt, I'm her namesake, and she knows the way in which I can show up when I am stressed, and the way I show up when I'm happy, and the way I show up when I'm tired. You need that feedback from people because, again, you are a brand and you need to know what you look like in the marketplace at all times. And so that knowledge of what you're capable of and how you show up, that's got to come from a way back when place. So
Mhm.
make sure you have a coach, identify at least three mentors, and do check-ins regularly. Are you sponsor ready? What are the gaps? Are you in a position right now working at a company where you can get access to those resources to where you can be? And is there anybody in the company that you work with that actually is somebody you want to sponsor you? Because sometimes that value alignment, and that's important. You have to have value alignment, much like values based in investing. You can't really have somebody talking about you on your behalf when you're not in the room using their capital when your values are not aligned. And so you've got to make sure that these are things that you're constantly working through and investing in yourself, to kind of get where you want to be. So that's the advice I would give around sponsorship and planning and coaching. And mind you, you're not going to have the same coach when you start your career as you do when you are getting that next promotion or getting that stretch assignment that you wanted. It's going to change based on your growth, and that's okay.
That it's interesting that you say that about coaching because if you look anywhere on the internet now, you see all these business coaches, and you're like, who is this person? How can one determine that they have actually, found a great business coach? What should they look for in a coach, basically?
So just like you interview a company, right? Listen. This is one of the most important decisions that you will make, right?
Mhm.
And there is this currency, our words and our time. And once words come out of your mouth, you cannot get them back. Well, once time has elapsed, we cannot get that back. And so, be very thoughtful and intentional about the process and the time that you put into identifying a coach. And do not go into this with what you think you need. Go into this with an open mind and interview people because the person who is right for you may be someone that you never expected. I find that my one of the coaches that I had initially, he was an older white guy, had a sales background, actually became a sales coach, and it was interesting to me how he could talk to me about what older white people would see. Right, gatekeepers
Mhm.
of power. Let's remember that. Right, this is a
Yeah.
conversation around the transference of power, power showing up in promotions and being put on teams and getting jobs, and being sponsors. And we know where right now, from a wealth perspective and an influence perspective, it sits overwhelmingly, predominantly with white men and then white women. And so I got a perspective from him as a white male, as a coach, that I may not have gotten from a black woman at that time.
Mm.
So now that doesn't mean that I didn't have black women as mentors. And Sid Marshall, she's the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. She is a mentor and a sponsor to me. So remember, it's not just one person for everything. You have to have a very well-rounded network and support system, right? But I gave that example because, again, interview people, talk to people, be very clear on what your goals are, and then talk through those goals, both short term and long term, in that interviewing process. And make sure that you interview at least three people, and then
Mm.
make a decision. And don't do it for 5 years, or do it in 90-day intervals to make sure that you're getting what you need, or if you need to move on.
No, I think that's a great point in terms of because you need to be able to evaluate your growth. And I think when you're with someone for an extended period of time, you don't know really if you're growing. You may not be growing in their eyes. And I tell people all the time, and I do relationship coaching. You
Mm,
shouldn't stay with me forever.
right.
You should be able to function on your own.
Yes.
And, I think people get really in a space of nervousness when they have to leave people. But then that's how you know that you've grown,
Yes.
when you can
Well, I
step
think,
out there on your own.
and I think also with currency, right? Just because you've earned more money doesn't mean you have to spend the money that's already in the bank, right?
Right.
And so with these, with coaches, there's still a relationship there that is valuable to you that you can maintain, but you're just not doing it in the same capacity. You're feeding your career and that growth in a different way, but that doesn't mean you have to completely abandon the relationship. They can still be part of your network. You're just not spending that time with them the way you used to anymore.
No, I love that. I love that. So here's the one thing, Carolyn, that plagues us as Black women. We get when,
The one thing, Dr. Ross, just one thing.
the one major thing that they like to describe us by. And I remember when I was in graduate school trying to get my doctorate to become this clinical psychologist,
Mhm,
that I constantly had to remind myself that I'm in a field where people describe your behaviors
mhm, mhm.
and they judge you by your behaviors and they make diagnoses by your behaviors.
Okay.
So anytime that I would say something, I would be like, I'm not the angry Black female. I'm just very passionate about this topic. But really, like we get like this stereotype of being the angry Black
Mhm.
female.
Right.
And it's not that we're that, it's just that we're such, I just think as Black women, we're such advocates. And when we see wrong, we want to right the wrong. So,
Mhm.
how do you, as a CEO, how do you mitigate that? How do you rise to the top, such as yourself?
Mhm.
Because, I mean, to become a CEO, you have to have a little something about you that says that you don't take any stuff. So how do you rise to the top and not be seen as this angry Black female and not be seen as this overbearing person when that's truly not who you are? You really just may be passionate about a topic, or it just may be just, men don't get considered that.
Mhm.
They don't have this whole threatening vibe. White men, we'll say white men,
Right.
because I think black men experience that. But how do you navigate those waters?
So let me just clarify. So, is this just a way in which somebody would be talking to me, and then it would eventually become clear that they think I'm angry or they think I'm passionate? Is this feedback that I'm getting from somebody else about how I am viewed by someone else? Like, set the stage for me, because there are two different responses based on that moment. So, and
Yeah.
I can address them both, but just tell me where you want me to start.
Well, let's start with the feedback from someone else, and then we'll do the other one because I think that's important.
Okay, so I always practice say don't shoot the messenger until you understand their intent, right? And so take every moment where someone is giving you feedback as an opportunity to learn something about yourself, about the messenger, or about the environment in which you are being experienced. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone would come to me and say, you made a lot of faces in that meeting, and so we're just curious, like, and I do make a lot of faces. I actually think that's one of my strengths. It is not a weakness, so let's just be clear.
Okay.
If my non-verbal cues help you understand exactly what I am agreeing with, don't agree with, or just think is downright silly, I think that makes me an effective communicator, don't you? I think that's a strength, not a weakness. And so um, sometimes when you talk about um, with that person, what you will not allow them to make bad about you but acceptable about others, that will go back. Again, do not let anybody take your power. That's the first thing. And then ask them what they think.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you experienced? And then think about it and then circle back. Do not allow feedback to go without discussing it. Once you've had an opportunity to kind of digest it, be thoughtful, ask people who you about it, and you'll get different answers. And then you'll decide from there: is it something that you have to work on? Is it something that needs to be addressed with a larger group? But that's what I would say to someone who is giving me feedback. If it happens in the moment, address it head on. If you had the audacity, depending on what it is, to bring it up, then you clearly have the time and ability to discuss it as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you have to ask the question and make sure people hear what they said, because sometimes they don't realize just how ridiculous it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I often say I don't believe in unconscious bias. I believe in unchecked behavior. It's time to start checking folks. And you check people live, you check people often, and they won't make the mistake again. And finally, am I angry? You're damn right I'm angry.
Mm-hmm.
And now you understand by watching the news and listening to the radio, the fact that we as Black women have been able to show up and be as supportive and graceful and understanding and foundational to this country, even through all of that, yes, I am angry. But it is how I use that anger. And do I use it to abuse other people? Am I abusive with that understanding of my power? No. That anger drives me to make life for everybody else around me better every single day. And so I'm angry, but you benefit from it. They benefit from it. So why don't we all stand up so that the reasons why Black women are angry are no more?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
So, and I'm going to join the comments section. It's a whole lot of say it, amen, hand waving. I have a girlfriend over here who was like, yes, like we're in church, because I think as Black women, we just have dealt with so much. And yeah, and when I tell my clients, it is okay to be angry. It's a valid emotion. And it's okay to be angry. It's just what you do when you're angry. Like you can't go
Exactly.
blow up the place, but
No.
if you're angry, that's a valid emotion and it needs to be expressed in a very healthy way and talked about. So I'm so glad that you said that because I think sometimes we make ourselves small because we don't want to be seen as that stereotype.
I mean, like again, like the same way that we will not allow people to define us, you will also not describe my emotions when you don't even know me, right? So that's
Yeah.
the other side. Um, Make sure that people understand that they must develop a relationship with you, get to know you before they try to judge you. And so I am willing to receive feedback from people who have taken the time to get to know me. I am not. I repeat, I am not interested in people who haven't done the research, haven't spent time with me, haven't done anything for people like me to judge me. No interest at all.
I love it. I love it. And that's a very interesting way to think about it because I think we get so caught up that we want to keep our jobs. One,
Yeah.
we want to grow in the company. We want to be seen as valued, and sometimes we get stuck in the process of not looking like we're making waves.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
well, here's the thing. We talk about authenticity, and we talk about, where does it come from? Like, people think about, the characteristics of authentic, genuine leaders, and more often than not, it comes later in your career. But I think that the main driver of authenticity is being able to be who you are
mhm,
all day, whether you're
mhm,
home, at work, in school, at church, volunteering. And if you think about it, Black women, women of color, don't get those opportunities. So if we're able to show up 25% of the time of our authentic selves, then is it possible that it's going to take us 3 times as long to really figure out who we are and and where we fit in an organization? I would tell you that's probably likely. And so this whole conversation around the anger and all this other stuff, know your resume, know your accomplishments. And so when somebody also comes at you and wants to talk about how they view your emotions or your facial expressions, be ready to fire back with, well, I hear you on all about all of that, and that's subjective. But the proof is I contributed this, my sales are this consistently. I've recruited, I've done this, I support the team. And so, again, don't just let people talk at you without defending yourself and owning your power
mhm.
of accomplishment. And so I'm going to get off that subject because it's something I'm passionate about and I can talk all day. Because
I love it.
that's the thing that's the one thing that with the fact that women are earning degrees for the first time in 2019, women earned more bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and PhDs than men, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But think about it: the Fortune 500, 38 women CEOs, and not one of them is black. Think about it. So start understanding where people try to take your power and stop them in their tracks. And it is your attitude because it's not your accomplishments that they will come for.
You know what? Thank you for saying that, because I know that just helped. That helped a lot of people. I can see in the chats that helped a lot of people, because I think, and you said this throughout the broadcast about taking your power, and I'm a huge proponent of that, like recognizing what your power is. But I
Mhm.
think sometimes we get so beaten down that we don't even know where our power lies. So thank you for um someone said thank you for turning passion into power. I love
Hey,
that. I
listen.
love that.
I
I
mean,
love
we
that.
want to talk about taking something that people have viewed as negative because it's their own lived experience, or others who want to take your power from you. Code switching, right? Um,
Hmm.
so the this idea that everywhere you go, you have to show up differently to be accepted. Well, we had an event in Atlanta, Women of Color and their allies. And for the first time, we talked about turning that on its head, because you want to know what I call that? I call that making an outstanding consultant. So if you think about a McKinsey, you think about Accenture, you think about BCG, they are consultants. They go into environments, different cultures, different industries, and they must become part of that culture in order to be able to help be a change agent. And so if that's how that is viewed in that space, in that industry, which is a knowledge working, impactful industry, well, why is it okay for it to be a skill there, but when it's you, it's not? And the answer is it is a skill, and you do have power, and you need to stand in that. The ability to be resilient through all of that stress and change and chaos, and you are still able to operate and be effective, that's a skill. That is not a weakness, and that is a strength.
I see a TED talk in your future of talking about power. I do. I absolutely see that in your future. Oh my goodness, because that is just giving me everything right here in this moment, that just gave me all the feels. I love it. We have a question. What approach would you take leading a diversity initiative? Yeah, I just love it. What approach would you take leading a diversity initiative where there has been none, and you ended up leading because nobody else
Mm.
would? Hmm.
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. So, it is the person being asked to lead a diversity initiative. It's like a trailblazing moment in an organization that they work at, and then they decide to leave. Like, I want to make sure I understand the question.
I think what she's saying, that there has been nothing before, so this would be the first time, and she's taken the initiative to
Okay.
do it.
Ah, okay. So, I have two views of this, right? And so, um, that is first and foremost, right?
Hmm.
Um, is this what you want to be doing with your career now, right? Um, we do not have to save everybody. I think about the fact that, um, because it's disrespectful, I'm not going to do it. But I really want the song that is played when I come out on stage or when I turn on my little camera in this COVID-19 era to be the late Betty Wright's The Cleanup Woman. Because you cannot allow people to make you clean up the messes for the fact that they had data to make a difference and make a change and they chose not to. And now they want you to clean up the mess. So that's the first thing. Is this what you want to be doing right now in your career? Second, after you have talked to your network, your personal board of directors, what does the strategy look like? What are you going to get out of this when it is all said and done, right? And what does success look like? Are you properly resourced from your own personal comp to resources that the organization is going to utilize for programs and consultants and materials and training? And are you properly positioned? Are you reporting to the right person? Um, is it required? You might even want to put this in the agreement. You are required to be before that person or the board on, on this frequency. Make sure that you are set up to succeed and that you are connected at the hip with a leader. So it's a partnership. So if failure happens, you didn't fail, you both failed. People will do things very differently if failure is also on them. So I would say be very strategic about how you think about the opportunity, what you want out of the opportunity, or if it's even for you.
I love that, because people will try to put the failure on you, and I love that. Make it
Mhm.
a collaborative effort so we both have to work just as hard to make sure it works.
Yeah.
But I also love the idea that you are not going to be the cleanup woman. I love that.
Listen, I'm like, I was given this situation, I didn't make it. And so if
Yeah.
it should all go wrong, you can't blame it all on me. So I
Yeah.
think that's important.
Nope. I love that. I love that. That was a great question, Shanita Alexander. That was a great question. And she says thank you. Zakia says thank you. Gina says thank you for answering their questions,
Oh, you're welcome.
and giving really great tips. And I know that your time is precious, and so we're about to end soon. But I wanted to get this question out.
Hmm.
Why is it so important to have women of color in place for the hiring process?
Mm. So, we talked about this from a talent development and a workforce practices perspective. We refer to this as diverse hiring slates, right?
Hmm.
And again, remember that no matter what your majority representation looks like, you need the other in the room, right? So you
Yeah.
could have a situation where it's all Black women. Well, guess what? You need other if you're going to be a fair employer, right? This is about fairness, okay?
Mhm.
And so you also need diversity on that panel because you want to make sure that what you are seeing is actually real. And so people's experiences and their understanding of what may have not come across as, competent or nervousness, that you have somebody who is in that space, who maybe even be their lived experience, who can give you feedback. And so you've got to make sure that diversity is represented on that panel, because if it's not, those what everybody calls unconscious biases will create a situation where you lose out on a really important candidate. And we know that when you're losing out on these candidates and it's a really long time for a position to be filled, then that gives external recruiters the opportunity to say, oh, well, there just isn't enough talent. No, you didn't look at talent equally. And so you didn't give all talent the same fair chance to compete. And that's why you have to have women of color, Black women, diversity on those
Mhm.
panels.
No, I think that's a really, really great point because we do not realize that we have unconscious biases until it's brought to our attention.
Right. And that's why you have to have a very strategic, um, interlaced approach to your hiring strategy, your development strategy, and how you impact the community. It is not separate, right?
Hmm.
Like how you view people and their need and their equality, that is something that must be pulled through all the way up through leadership and then back down. We've got to keep sowing that idea and that attitude through the entire company. It's not just for leaders to do. It's not just for the folks that are, entry level. It is for everybody. That is a behavior and a viewpoint that everybody must have at a company.
Nope, I love it. It makes perfect sense. I want to let our viewers know that they should probably get their last questions in now because we're,
Yeah, and I've got 1 minute and then I have to go.
yeah, so hurry up. This is the very last question.
Okay.
How do you take care of you, your mother, your wife, your CEO? How do you make sure you don't have burnout?
Um, Grace,
Hmm.
grace. We don't give ourselves grace enough. And the enough isn't enough itis is what I call it. I think we fall prey to that on our own without any outside influence. And
Mhm.
so, knowing that it is not going to be perfect every time, nothing ever is, right? This idea that we can actually achieve perfection, we will take our last breath on this earth and it still won't happen because it is impossible. And so, giving yourself grace, making sure that you do not allow too much time to pass by without like kind of reviewing what the priorities are because they change every day.
Mhm.
You're juggling. Are you keeping your eye on what's about to hit the ground, or are you on autopilot? Be present. That is also very important because autopilot gets us in trouble, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
makes us miss our exit, right? We all drive on the highway and we're supposed to be going somewhere else, but we're on autopilot and we just keep going. When you miss your exit, you miss opportunity and you cannot be on autopilot. And so I would tell you, Grace, be patient with yourself. Last but certainly not least, pour into yourself as if you are a never ending well because you are. And that is the only way you will be able to take care of other people. Give yourself the amount of time to get rest, take care of your body, drink water, hydrate, and don't let people abuse you and take advantage of you. I would
Mm.
tell you that's how I'm able to do it all. And sometimes I fail. I fail a lot, but my wins are memorable. And
Mm.
so that's the advice that I would give to folks who are trying to juggle it all in this new age and new, I can't even say normal because we don't even know what the norm is yet. But I'll tell you what
Right.
it shouldn't be. People be looking down on others because they're different than them. We can
Mm.
never go back to that ever.
Absolutely. Carolyn, thank you so much. Thank you. This has been such an enlightening lunch and learn, such a great hour to just hear just your thoughts on how women of color can expand in the workplace. I
Yeah.
want to make sure all of our listeners know how to get in touch with you. So can you give us your social media handles? I have one scrolling, but I want them following you on everything because we all need to hear this greatness that you're putting out in the universe.
So I would tell you that while I am on Instagram and Twitter, I think the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn, because I really again, this is about business. Diversity is not about nice to have. This is about profitability. This is about being competitive. This is about being number one. Okay. And so if you want to connect with me in a business fashion through LinkedIn. And all you have to do is search Carolynn Johnson, DiversityInc, and I'll come right up. You can send me a message. You can send me a customized message to connect. And let me know why you want to connect with me, what it is that you need, and I'll be more than happy to oblige.
And I just want to say too, because we have a couple that are listening, Carolyn is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. She is our soror. So whenever greatness is in the building, you know, AKA is right there. So I just want to say, Sora, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I'm just excited about all that you're doing and that you're helping.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. And listen, I appreciate you for allowing me to leverage your influence and your platform for my message. So I greatly appreciate you for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone, for checking out the Dr. Ross Show. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you share this with your network because there were some nuggets and some gems that were dropped today that's going to help us all in our career path. So thank you. And I love you all with the grace of God and have a wonderful and beautiful day.